of you who are participating, we encourage you to please unmute and identify yourself. Say, hi, my name is, and I'll be joining in, or hello, my name is, I'm ready to go. This class works because of your participation. So if you need help adding your name, simply let us know. The presentation will be recorded for university purposes. If you have any questions, we encourage you to ask for yourself by raising the hand button in the reactions bar, or you can place your question in the chat and it will be addressed at an appropriate time. And finally, if you stay till the very end of the course, we encourage you to complete an evaluation course.
I think we lost her. Yes, we do want to make sure that everybody can provide an evaluation. And we appreciate you coming to the session today. I don't know if she had anything else to add, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brian. So Brian, when you're ready, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. For those that were here last month, I just want to again say that if you have any questions, please feel free to cut me off, ask your question. I do not mind that at all. As a matter of fact, I love the participation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just jump in, ask me, and I will be more than happy to answer anything you have. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the ghosts and legends of Alcatraz Island. Most of us know it as a federal prison, but Alcatraz has an extremely long history with California that is completely different than the history most of us know. Before San Francisco Bay was filled in by the Pacific Ocean, the Ohlone tribe used to hunt at the base of Alcatraz, because Alcatraz was actually a mountain. And what we see today is the mountain peak. So the Ohlone did what most of the tribes did when the Pacific Ocean started to fill in the Bay Area. They just moved, and finally they moved to the point where they just became fishermen. Now, one of the strange things that I found when I was doing research on Alcatraz was that the Ohlone at some point began to think of Alcatraz Island as cursed. So they actually turned Alcatraz Island into a place of exile. So if somebody broke the code or one of the laws of the tribe, they were sent to Alcatraz. And I apologize, I do not know what they called the island at the time, but they did use it as a fishing stop. However, they would not go anywhere more than, say, 20 feet from the shore if they could avoid it. Now, when they started to use it as an exile, they would bring supplies out to those that they exiled, and they would basically just leave them on the shore for the exiled to come and get, because I mean, they didn't want them dying by their hands. However, they did believe that there were evil spirits there that would eventually take care of the people that they exiled. Now, one of the more frightening that they believed in was a creature called a bukwus. And the only thing I can say to describe it is it looked kind of like a wet, decaying zombie. And the bukwus was thought to be a creature that was brought forth by drowning victims. So a drowning victim would become a bukwus, and that was if the drowning victim themselves had a, shall we say, an evil core to them. Now, the bukwus were known to the Ohlone to try and turn other people into bukwus. Now, the way they did that is they would fix what they called ghost food. And they would go up to humans and they would offer them the ghost food. And if the human was not bright enough and ate the ghost food, they would in turn become bukwus themselves. Now, if they didn't eat the food, the bukwus would actually try to drown them and force them to become their slaves, basically, and they would be destined to follow that particular bukwus around for eternity. Now, the Ohlone actually thought that most of the ones that they exiled would actually turn into bukwus once they were on the island for any length of time. There is also another cryptid creature that was thought by the Spanish to inhabit the island, and it was what they called a matacagmi. Now, the matacagmi is basically what we would call a Bigfoot. Now, the Native Americans, our belief in Bigfoot is completely different from what we think of Bigfoot as. You know, we think of them as these vicious, possibly evil creatures that just want to tear humans limb from limb. The Ohlone and the other Native American tribes believed that the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Matacagmi, whatever you want to call them, were something completely different, that they basically just wanted to be left alone. And if we treated them with respect, they would in turn treat us with respect. One of the tales from the Modoc tribe was of a Native American who had gone fishing, and as he was heading back to his cabin, heard something that he had never heard before, some sort of a weird growl. And there in front of him was a Sasquatch. They basically just sat there and stared at each other. But the Modoc, believing, okay, well, let's see what would happen, he gave the Matacagmi his fish. The Matacagmi kind of made this weird little noise, took the fish, and wandered off into the forest. About a month later, snows hit, and the Modoc was kind of stuck in his cabin, and he heard this strange noise again, and it sounded like the same noise that he had heard when he was coming back from fishing. And he went outside, saw the Matacagmi, who sort of gave him that weird little grunt, turned around and walked away, but he had left a whole bunch of berries and some meat for the Modoc. And it turns out that the Matacagmi did that pretty much all winter and helped the Modoc survive. And it was basically a thank you for him giving him the fish. A few years later, the Modoc was out hunting and broke his leg. And he couldn't stand, he couldn't walk, and he was literally dying. So he had passed out. And when he woke up, he was actually being carried by a group of Matacagmi who carried him down to close to one of the other tribes. They didn't get close, but they dropped him off close enough to where the tribe could find him, and they let out a howl to let the other tribe know that this man was there, and thus saved him. Now, naturally, this is folklore, but the way they treat the Matacagmi compared to the way we, treat them was completely different. Now, when the Spanish took over Alcatraz, they believed that there was a red-eyed monster that was after them while they were on Alcatraz. The reason they were on Alcatraz is that is where a lot of the Native Americans had gone out, even though they were scared to death of the Bukwus who may be living on the island. They were more scared of the Spanish and the brutality the Spanish had towards them in trying to convert them to Christianity. So they believe that the Matacagmi was actually on Alcatraz to help protect them. So yeah, Alcatraz has a very long history of, you know, I mean, literally from the Native American period, the Spanish period, through to the Mexican period, and then right into when America was given California after they paid Mexico for California. Now, Alcatraz was originally, as far as American involvement goes, a base of defense for San Francisco Bay. San Francisco Bay at the time had a fort on either side of the channel, which would basically now be underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And Alcatraz, being straight ahead, actually had armament on it facing out toward the ocean. The thought was that any ships trying to come in would, you know, be caught not only in a crossfire, but in fire straight ahead. And at the time, it was extremely effective. Now, we all have a picture of what Alcatraz looked like when today. So let me see if I can get this up. Sorry, this is my first time doing this. Can you guys see the photo I have up?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what Alcatraz looked like in the late 1800s. And as you can see, it looks completely different than what we see today. This area right here down by the sailboat, that is where today you would, they would bring the guests over to visit the island. So this is the dock. And then right up here on the top is where the prison was eventually built. Now, at the time this photo was taken, the island was actually used as a prison for malcontents and basically army deserters. At one point, it was used to house Confederate prisoners of war and other people. Now, let me see if I can get the other photo here. Okay, let me share this. Can you guys see this, or do I need to share it again? Okay.
We can see it.
You can see it? Okay. So this right here is what was called the Sally Port. And if you can see, there's these rails here. This is where the gun emplacement would be. And it would swing on these little cement tracks. Now, can you see the grate that is just off to the left?
It's distorted.
It's distorted? Well, okay, so this right here, if you can see it on the left in the floor, that is where the original prison would be. It was down below this room, and it was only the size of this room. And they would literally cram so many people in there that you couldn't even move. Now, at one point, the men down there had contracted tuberculosis. To try and help them as much as they could, doctors and nurses volunteered to come over from San Francisco to tend to these men. And at one point, one of the nurses contracted the disease and they would not allow her to leave the prison. And she ended up passing away down there. Now, the only way that I found out about this or even realized that I should go looking for it is that my team and I were doing an overnight on Alcatraz, spending the night. And we were in this room, this Sally Port, and we were actually the first ones ever to investigate this area. And we caught an EVP of a woman. Now, are you all familiar with what an EVP is?
No, we're not. I'm not.
I'm not
Okay.
either.
For those who don't, an EVP stands for electronic voice phenomenon. It is a voice that is recorded that you cannot hear at the time of the recording. So we did not hear her when she originally spoke. But one of the things that we do is we will record for, say, 5 minutes, and then we will replay our recording to see if there was any voices that were picked up by the recorder. So we picked up a voice of a woman who all we heard originally was "what," and it was a long drawn out "what," like she couldn't believe that there was somebody there talking. So we turned it off and we started to ask her questions. And when we replayed it, the only thing we got was her saying, "Oh my God." And we were trying to figure out, okay, why is there a woman's voice in this Sally Port? Now, at the time that the federal prison was there, yes, there were women that lived on the island. They were the girlfriends and wives and family of the prison guards. But we couldn't figure out why they would have been in the Sally Port, because the families were not allowed in the Sally Port other than to walk down to the dock. So that's when I decided to do a little bit of research on the history of Alcatraz to find out why there would possibly be a female voice there. And that's when we discovered this brave nurse who had come over from San Francisco to try and tend to the men.
Brian, I hope you don't mind if I interrupt for just a second.
Not
We're
at all.
stuck on one of your images. Your image 2 is like in a warped state of,
It is?
it's just stuck up for us. I don't know if
Okay.
you guys are seeing that too. We're
No,
still
I'm
the first
seeing the
picture.
same thing.
Yeah.
Let me,
Yeah, now it's fine.
Yeah.
How's it
Now
going?
try sharing it again. Mhm.
okay. Okay, that's not the one. I seem to have gotten rid of it.
Uh-oh.
Hold on, I can probably find it again.
Okay.
It would be this one. Okay, can you guys see that?
No, you're not sharing yet. And
Not
also
sharing.
we do need you to turn on your camera if it's available.
I didn't turn it on?
No.
Did that work?
There you go. Now we can.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Quite all right.
You know, I'm like I said, I'm new to this, so. Okay. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So can you guys see the area I was talking about in the floor off to the left?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that leads down to where I was saying the original holding cell is. And if you can see the shape of the room and the size of the room, there's a person off to the right that'll sort of give you a little bit of definition on how big it was. When I took the picture, I am actually standing against the other wall. So that shows you just how small it was. And the original prison was the same size. And at one point, if I remember right, they had like 130 men down in there, crammed into that area. So obviously, you know, not not a comfortable situation. I have a close up here. Let me see if I can share this one for you guys. And it's not coming up. My apologies. Okay, can you guys see this photo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is another view of what Alcatraz looked like during the late 1800s. You'll notice at the very top left, the old lighthouse. That lighthouse was eventually torn down for a much taller tower. One of the strange occurrences on Alcatraz is that this particular lighthouse that you're looking at will actually still become visible even though it no longer exists. There are times that some of the old military personnel, when they were still on the island, it was actually, even when it was a prison during World War II, the US military used Alcatraz as a supply depot. And even at that time, during foggy days, some of the soldiers and guards would actually see that lighthouse appear out of nowhere. And no one has ever been able to figure out why a building would just pop up. It's just one of the strange things that happens on Alcatraz. Now, I do have, this is what Alcatraz looks like today and what most of us will recognize. So you can see how much different the island looks now than the way it was originally. Now, this one shows the new lighthouse, if you can see it. It's right up front. It's that tall tower. That is where the old lighthouse will appear, and the new lighthouse will actually be popped up right through the old lighthouse's light tower. So if you can imagine just walking around as, you know, on your guard duty rounds or as a military personnel, and just all of a sudden seeing the this old wooden lighthouse pop up, it's got to be a shock. Just below this current lighthouse, you can't really make it out, but you can see that there's sort of a structure directly in front of it and below the lighthouse. You can sort of make out a couple little windows there, but that is where they would operate and man the lighthouse. When we were, it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were walking past the lighthouse to go back up into the main prison, and we heard a bunch of men talking in there. Now, it's completely padlocked, so no one can get in there. But we stopped and we heard actual conversations. We heard men laughing. We heard equipment being used. It was something that was just really bizarre. Now, granted, we loved every minute of it because we're not normal, but it was one of the more interesting things that we had happen. That was on the second night. We actually spent the night on Alcatraz twice. The first night was in 2009, and the second night was the following year in 2010. Now, the first year we were there, the activity in the prison was just incredible. The second year, it was pretty light. We got a little bit, but it was nothing like the year before.
Excuse me, Brian.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Donna.
Hi, Donna.
I was fortunate enough to have like a sort of like a back stage tour of Alcatraz.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was just amazing. So, but this was my question. You know, underneath the prison, you know, there's like kind of a basement type area, an underground area that was also a prison. And basically, like you said, deserters, and
Right.
when it was an army base. And you could even see, like when you go down in there, there's really hardly any lighting, but you can see on the wall where the men would write, because it's still there on the wall,
Right.
the days they were here, what their names are. But anyway, so my question was, did you get anything, any kind of notion or any evidence at all that any of the people from those days, you know, were still there among the prison?
Well, we didn't when we were there, and we were allowed down, and that area is now known as the Citadel.
Yeah, the Citadel.
Yeah, some people call it the dungeon. But my team, we did not get any kind of evidence from down there. However, when I was writing Ghosts and Legends of Alcatraz, I did go to Alcatraz, and I did manage to get some of the guards to tell me some of their ghost stories. And one of the ghost stories that the guard had told me was that a tour guide had been closing up for the night, and he started to hear somebody begging to be let out. And so he went looking, and he was like, okay, there shouldn't be anybody here. So he went looking to see who was, you know, maybe somebody got stuck in one of the cells, because they do on occasion open and close the cell doors. But as he started to track the voice, he realized it was coming from the stairs leading down into the Citadel. And again, it was a female voice. And he was like, okay, somebody had to have gotten down there. Now they're stuck. He didn't have keys. The person was literally begging to be let out. So he went and got one of the rangers, who were the only ones that have the keys to that area. And when the ranger himself and another tour guide came back up, they could still hear this person begging to be let out of the Citadel. They unlocked the door, went down, and there was nobody there. But all three of them heard this person. And we were kind of wondering whether it might have been one of the Native Americans, because we do know that there were a few Native Americans during the 1969, 70s occupation. Occupation sounds funny because Alcatraz technically does belong to the Native Americans. That a few people did pass away down there, because some of them were living down there. They would start fires did you notice the arches that were down there? When you were there?
I'm trying to remember. I probably saw them, but I don't really remember.
Okay.
Just, I know it was very, very dark.
Yeah.
And the person giving us the tour had a flashlight. It was very cold and just very, you know, and just to see the handwriting, and, you know, it just was.
Now, so all right, let me finish. So those arches are reset, and those would actually be where they would put some prisoners, and it's where a lot of the Native Americans, when they were on the island, occupying the island in the 70s, they would have their sleeping quarters, and a few of them did pass away from I guess carbon monoxide. They kept saying smoke inhalation, and I guess it's possible. But then also the dungeons early on in the federal penitentiary days, that area down there was the isolation ward. So if a prisoner was misbehaving, shall we say, they would put them down there. It was also closed fairly early on as being inhumane, because the guards would actually take the prisoners down there, and they would do this thing called putting them to the water. They would strip them down, and they would douse them with ice cold water and then just leave them there. You being down there, you know how cold it was, and you were probably there during the day. Can you imagine that at night? So yeah, that's what that's really one of the only things that I heard about some evidence coming from that area. I do know that some friends of mine who were there that night had caught a few disembodied voices, but I'm not really, I can't really comment on that. So, you know, I'm just kind of going by what the tour guide and ranger had told me. So I forgot where I was. Well, you know what? We'll go with the Native American occupation. So during the late 60s, early 70s, the Native Americans had taken over the island. And again, I feel kind of weird saying that. That's kind of officially what they say, is that it was a Native American occupation, but the land itself technically does still belong to the Native Americans. So this building right here is the first building you see when you get off of the boat when you come over to Alcatraz. And you'll notice that it still says Indians welcome. That was actually put up by the Native Americans when they occupied the island. The one problem with them occupying it is they really didn't care, and I can't say as I blame them, but they really didn't care about the history of the island during the American ownership. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble trying to figure out exactly what to say, because you know, it's kind of, the island itself is still in a lot of ways still up in the air on who it belongs to. So they actually destroyed quite a bit of the history of the island. Below the main area, right in front of the lighthouse, there is a big plain that used to be housing for guards, their families, and things like that. The Native Americans basically destroyed it. They lit fires in a lot of areas that destroyed a lot of the other buildings on the island, and including, and I'm going to show you this one here, the old, and this, what I'm about to show you, was the warden's house, and it was what you would call a palatial estate. This is what the Native Americans did to the warden's house. And today, believe it or not, if you are on the island late at night, you may still see spirits roaming the this structure on the inside. So it's almost like the ghosts do not realize that the building itself is now all but destroyed. And luckily, this entire structure was about to collapse, but luckily, a movie studio was shooting a movie. You might have seen it. It was called The Rock. They came in and completely stabilized this structure. So we at least have Hollywood to thank for that. But some of the other areas that were, you know, rather historic were just completely destroyed, which, you know, to me, it is really kind of sad. For those who have not been to Alcatraz, when the prisoners were there, and this was part of the punishment, shall we say, for prisoners on Alcatraz, this is what they would see. So can you imagine being a prisoner on Alcatraz, seeing this right out of your cell window, if you were lucky enough to be on the second or third floor that you could actually look out, or on the exercise yard or something like that, and knowing that this is right in front of you? It had to have been one of the harder things for the prisoners to deal with. The prisoners at one point were not allowed to speak to each other. They had a code of silence and were not mistreated per se, but had very strict rules. To help make up for that, the strict rules, they were actually the prison that had the best food. They would literally serve them steak and lobster on occasion, just to try and keep them placated, I guess. So I want to go into a little bit of the ghost stories. So what I'm going to share here, this is the showers of Alcatraz. And the interesting thing about this area is this is where Al Capone is heard the most. Now, when I pass away, I want Al Capone's travel guide. Al Capone is seen in so many places that he has to have a travel guide. He's seen here at Alcatraz. He's seen in Chicago. He's seen in Florida. He's seen in Philadelphia. So the man gets around. But because of his notoriety, he was sought after by some of the other inmates to be killed so they could brag that I killed Al Capone. And at one point he was stabbed. He did survive, but he became a recluse. Now, he was also part of the Alcatraz band, and he would actually come down here instead of going to the exercise yard and practice his banjo and his other instrument. So you can actually still hear him playing down in the shower area. And unfortunately, we did not find any evidence of Al Capone when we were there, but we were kind of hoping, because we really wanted to ask him, who he who his travel agent was. Now, have all of you heard of the Great Escape from Alcatraz? There was a movie starring Clint Eastwood, titled Escape from Alcatraz. Is there anybody that's not familiar with this? Okay, so this is one of the cells of the Anglin brothers, and you can just barely make out in the bed. You will see one of the heads that the prisoners had made to fool the guards, and they actually worked really well. Now, I just wanted to bring this up because there is growing evidence that the Anglin brothers and I'm having a mental block on the other man, that they did survive and did escape. There was apparently a FOIA request by the FBI that they did have some evidence that the three men had carjacked, if I remember right, it was a 54 Chevy, and had also been spotted crossing the border down in the San Diego area. But if you ever get to Alcatraz, I highly recommend checking this cell out. It's really kind of interesting. This next one I'm going to show you, we had some very interesting evidence that we caught from here. So this area here is obviously the kitchen. And there was a man by the name of Alvin Creepy Carpus. And he was the longest serving prisoner at Alcatraz. He actually had a life sentence, but had gotten out, I believe, in 67, if I remember correctly. After Alcatraz closed down, he was transferred to a penitentiary in Kansas. And then he moved to Spain. He passed away in Spain, and his girlfriend buried him in a crypt, but kind of like the crypts in New Orleans, you have to pay for them monthly. Well, they stopped paying for his grave. He was removed from the grave and put in a unmarked pauper's grave somewhere, and no one knows where. Since his body was moved from the crypt, he has been showing up in the kitchens at Alcatraz. Now, he really enjoyed working in the kitchens. And one of the things that he had done was he had kidnapped the heir to the Ham's beer empire. Unfortunately, that was one of the things that helped get him caught, because Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a good friend of the Ham's family and put out a major request to get this man captured. And that's what finally got him captured. However, when he was at Alcatraz, he would delight in humming the Ham's beer song. So we were at Alcatraz, and we were kind of doing an EVP session out in front of the kitchen, because it's closed off, has bars, you can't get to it. And we started seeing shadows passing by. Can you see like the little room off to the back there? The guards would be in there to keep an eye on the kitchens. And we would actually see a shadow walking back and forth in front of that, a couple times behind it. We would hear knives, silverware, and things like that being moved around. We would hear chopping. And then at one point, we actually started to hear somebody humming the Ham's beer song. So we sort of figured that was Mr. Carpus letting us know that what we were seeing was him. But we still love to tell that story, because it's just kind of, it was a cool thing for us to have happen. We tried to get him to come back the following year, but he apparently was off doing something else, because he did not show up in the kitchen. One of the things that you may find amusing, we were on the island with 30 other ghost hunters. Now, my team, it's only 4 of us. We sort of split off from everybody else, because if you get too many people in one area, the spirits tend to kind of pull away, I guess, because they don't, like the crowds. But also it starts to get noisy, and any evidence you catch is suspect and things like that. Well, it was about 4 a.m, and I had to run back to our cell, because you actually sleep in the cells when you're on Alcatraz doing the overnight. And I had to get some batteries, so I go back into the cell block, and it was D block. And as I walk in, I'm hearing snoring and things like that. And I look up at all of the cells, and I'm thinking to myself, this is hilarious. I'm there with a whole bunch of ghost hunters, and every single one of them had a nightlight hanging in their cell. And I just found it rather amusing, because it's like, all right, a bunch of ghost hunters, and they seem to be afraid to sleep with ghosts. So I have always found that just funny. Okay, why am I having trouble with my photo here? I cannot seem to get my photo to come down.
If you need to, you can stop your share and then try to locate the next photo that you want to share, and then restart that.
Okay.
Okay.
There it is. Okay, good. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I'll get the hang of this sooner or later. So this photo right here is cell 14D. Now, this is considered the most haunted spot on Alcatraz. The tale says that there is a spirit, some call it a demon, that resides in this cell. Now, this was also known as a strip cell. And that means that the prisoner was stripped down to nothing but boxers and was thrown in this cell. The cell itself is extremely sparse. Let me, I'm going to have to do this because for some odd reason, my photographs are not being able to be brought down. Okay. And they were just thrown in there, and this is the cell. You'll notice that there are no beds, no toilet, no chairs, no nothing in here. You will see just below the grate a off-colored round circle. That was a hole in the floor that was the toilet for whoever was thrown in this cell. So this was it. You got thrown in here just in your skivvies. This cell door was closed. Then the outside door that I had shown in the other photo was closed. No lights, no nothing. And people would be thrown in there for, I think the longest was 32 days. Now, the reason that they believe there is a creature, demon, spirit, has to do with the fact that there is a story of a prisoner who was thrown in there about 2 or 3 hours after he was put in the cell. He started screaming, "Let me out, let me out." Excuse me. There's something in here. It's going to kill me. I need to get out of here. And the guards, figuring that he was, just trying to figure out a way to get out of the cell because nobody really wanted to be in there, just ignored him. He kept screaming for about an hour and then just silence. The following morning, they woke him up, or I'm sorry, they went in to wake him up and found him strangled. So he was dead. The thing is he was still wearing his skivvies. There was no cords in there. There obviously was no person in there, so they cannot figure out how the man could have possibly been strangled. The following morning, D Block was doing its morning prisoner count and counted one prisoner too many. And when they went back to count, they saw the man who had passed away the day earlier standing in line. He had been counted, and as they went over to him, he just vanished. So that's the tale of this cell. Now, we did spend the night in this cell, and we did not have anything happen to us, but it's just one of those tales of Alcatraz that it will continue to persist. I'm going to put this one up. Has everybody here heard of the Battle of Alcatraz? So when Alcatraz was taken over, they had called in the United States Marines to try and stop the, it technically wasn't a riot, but that's basically what it was called. And the Marines trying to stop it got up on the roof of Alcatraz and dropped grenades down into the prison trying to quell the revolt. Now, this is a picture of where the grenades dropped. On the lower left, you can see one of the scorch marks that the grenade left. On the right wall, you can see a couple bullet holes, which happened when they finally got into the cell. And the white marks are also from grenades that had been dropped down into this particular corridor. The 3 men who started it, trying to hide once the Marines got in there, had crawled into a corridor between the cell blocks. And when they went in there, they found all 3 of them dead. Today, if you go near this area, they actually have the corridor blocked off with plexiglass, but you can still see into the corridor. It is not unheard of for folks to actually hear the inmates who passed away there calling out, asking for help, calling out that they surrender, and various other things. So that is also considered one of the more haunted areas of the prison. Now, this last photo that I'm going to share, nope, wrong one, sorry. This one, this is where we had one of the most incredible experiences that I personally have ever had, and definitely the most intense experience we had while on Alcatraz. Now, this area on screen is the part of the medical isolation ward. Now, this area is directly above the mess hall, and this is where the Birdman of Alcatraz spent most of his time, not in this particular cell, but in the medical ward of Alcatraz. And just as an FYI, we still do not know why he's called the Birdman of Alcatraz, because he was not allowed to have birds while on Alcatraz. But he actually still has 2 books that are published that ornithologists still classify as some of the best source material on ornithology ever written. So Stroud may have been a murdering you-know-what, but he did know his birds. Okay, so this area is the right-hand room. Now, there are only 3 rooms in this particular isolation ward. You have a room and you come in a door similar to the one you're seeing in the photo. The only difference is it had bars. So when you walk in that particular door, the one that resembles that, off to your left is a small room that would have held 2 beds. Directly in front of you is another room that would have held 2 beds. And then you have this room that, if I remember correctly, held 5 beds. So the other 2 rooms are now used as storage, so you can't get in there. So we had gone into this room here. We grabbed those 2 chairs, and then there were 2 others up against this wall. So we moved those 2 chairs and put them over with the other ones because we didn't want to be near the door. But by the way, that door leads to a ladder that goes down 3 flights to the lower section outside the main prison. So we were doing an EVP session, and we weren't really feeling like we were getting anything. And we were there for maybe 20, 25 minutes. And we decided, all right, well, let's go try somewhere else. So we gather our stuff up, we walk out the door, and I tell everybody, hey, I gotta change my batteries. So we all waited as I changed my batteries. We set our stuff down on a little wooden bench that they have outside the door. And I'm changing my batteries, and all of a sudden we hear something going on back in this room. And we're like, what the heck is going on? So I finished changing the batteries, and we go back in there, and all of those metal chairs that we had left up against this wall are now over on the far right. So we're like, wait, what? So we look around, there's nobody anywhere in either of those three rooms. So we're like, okay, that's kind of weird. So we sit down in the chairs off to the right now, do another session with our recorders, and we still don't seem to be getting anything. So we're like, okay, well, we'll just have to chalk that up to a spirit maybe, playing with us. We get up, we walk back out. As soon as we leave the smaller door, we start hearing the chairs move again. We're like, really? So we go back in there. Now the chairs that had moved from the left-hand wall over to the right are now back over on the left, almost in the exact same spot that we had originally left them. So we're like, all right, we're going to try this one more time. So we sit down, and my buddy Bob starts asking questions. And one of the questions he asks is, or actually not a question, but he says, if there is somebody here and you don't want us here, just tell us to get out and we'll leave. So right after he says that, my buddy Ash, who weighed about 330 to 340 pounds, he's sitting in one of those metal chairs. His chair goes sliding back about 10 feet, slams into the wall. He flops over, and at the same time his chair is sliding backwards, we hear a male voice say, "Get out." Guess what we did? We got out. But seriously, I mean, that was one of the, I don't think I have ever had anything like that happen before or since that I have been doing paranormal investigations. And, that was the first year. As I said, the first year we were there, the activity was a lot greater than the second year. But yeah, Alcatraz is definitely one of those places that if anybody is interested in ghost activity, is definitely a place that you might want to go. So I kind of spoke a little long, but I don't need to go anywhere. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Would it be possible to hear the recordings of the nurse or see videos of some of the spirits you saw at Alcatraz?
Do you have YouTube?
Yes.
If you go to Planet Paranormal Bob Davis, I don't know why he did that, but he took all of the Planet Paranormal audio and video that I had created and put it on his own. So you do have to kind of sift through. Well, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. As far as Alcatraz goes, go to PLPI Brian 1. And I have a video up that is called Voices of Alcatraz that does have our EVPs and captures from both years on there.
I'm dropping a link in for the Planet Paranormal Bob Davis.
Okay.
And if you can tell us the other one again.
PLPI Brian 1. PLPI Brian 1.
I see the Queen Mary one.
Yeah, there should be Queen Mary. There should be Voices of Alcatraz and a couple others.
Okay.
All
All right.
I was going to say all the ones that are on Bob's used to be on mine, but he stole them all. I don't know why.
Okay, got it.
And I am starting to put them up on my website, which is just brianclune.com.
Okay, so those are in the chat and we'll make them available. Paulette, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, when you were in the cells, did you feel their presence? Or
I kind of joke about the fact that I have as much psychic ability as my tennis shoe. So I don't really feel the spirits. I don't believe. However, there are times when I will get a very strange tickle in my throat that makes me want to cough. So I've started keeping either cough drops or hard candy in my pocket. And somebody, a psychic friend of mine, noticed that I always seem to do that whenever he is picking up on spirits in the area. So it may be, but I can't really say that it is. One of the strange things that did happen, this was back up in the medical ward. We were in the surgical area, and we were standing next to the surgery table, and I started to get that tickle. And a little later on, when we got back home and we were reviewing our recordings, about the same time that I was getting that tickle, we captured a what sounds like an adolescent boy saying, "I am Jacob." So whether there's a correlation there or not, I really couldn't tell you. It's been so long since I've been out on any kind of investigation because of the pandemic and other issues that I haven't really fully explored whether that tickle does have anything to do with spirits being in the area. But I plan on trying to develop it.
okay, thank you.
Any last questions before we get ready to wrap up? I think we're good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Kathleen, you can close us out.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian. I love all these talks that you give us. We learn so many things. Paranormal is something that I like personally, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and having this wonderful discussion. We hope to join us soon for our third session. Let's see when that would be.
I believe that's the 7th of next month.
Yes, the 7th of next month. So join us for that.
April 4th.
Was it April 4th?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. And it will be my favorite subject, the Queen Mary.
So join us for the Long Beach Queen Mary for our next session with Brian. And hopefully everyone has a good day today. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.